again, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to introduce the Right Honourable Lisa Nandy MP, our new Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport. Lisa has been the Labour MP for Wigan since 2010. She's held numerous roles in the Shadow Cabinet and was most recently Shadow International Development Minister. She is no stranger to the world of broadcasting. Her mother is the ex-Granada TV journalist Louise Byers, who as head of news at that time was responsible for Granada's coverage of the Hillsborough Football Stadium disaster. Her stepfather was the late, great RTS award-winning investigative journalist Ray Fitzwater, who was editor of Granada's World in Action. Lisa has arrived at the Culture Department with the long-awaited media bill having been enacted, but during a time of great technological and economic challenge for our sector. We look forward to hearing what she has to say.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's brilliant to be here with you today. I know that you hear this from all newly appointed Cabinet Ministers, that becoming Culture Secretary is a dream job. But in the last few months, I've had the chance to meet some of the most creative people I've ever met in my life, and to see what they're building and creating in every single part of the United Kingdom. And that's just Hackatea Dog. Seriously though, there was a reason that my first meeting with the BBC was with Hackatea in Salford. Because this puppet dog, who happens to hail from Wigan, which is the greatest place on earth, has a very special place in my household and so many others. And children's TV is one of the things that your industry and our country is brilliant at. It gives people and communities in towns like mine a connection to what and who they see on the screen, and a belief that the broadcasters behind them are part of their story and belong to them. And I want to talk to you today about why that matters so much, and why I believe that this has to be core to this industry that has much to celebrate, but is in a challenging period. A technology and media revolution, without a clear strategy for how we equip ourselves for this era. There's a choice ahead of us, whether we choose to be the last guardians of this chapter, or whether we choose to be the first pioneers of the next. So today I'm laying out how our new government will go about helping to create the conditions for this new era, not just patching up broken models and ways of working, but ensuring you have the right framework, conditions and backing to thrive well into the future, and being clear about the change we need from you in return. A lot's happened since the last Secretary of State addressed you back in 2009. Back then there was a lively debate raging about how to switch to digital terrestrial television. Now the debate is about whether to switch away. In 2009, a DeepMind AI bot winning a chess match made headline news. Now we're grappling with the unprecedented reach of AI and what it means for our creative industries. Back then, 11 million newspapers were sold every day in the UK. Today, more than half of us get our news from TikTok and other social media channels. Today, we don't need a printing press to spread the news. We just reach for the phones in our pockets, and at an instant, it's done. And on top of all this change, you've had to contend with a global pandemic, a downturn in TV advertising, and needless culture wars for the last 5 years. The world has changed. It's opened up for you new challenges, but also endless possibilities. And I think, if we're honest, every single one of us has struggled in our own ways to navigate this new terrain. All of you in this room will know that the challenges that are thrown up by new technology are not new. The invention of the printing press in the 1400s led to more books being published in the 50 years following than in the 100 years before. It was a great leveller and a great disruptor. Suppression became impossible, gatekeepers lost power to the people, the idea of universal truth itself was up for grabs, ideas spread, authority was challenged. But just as that power was used to inform, to empower, to enlighten, it was also used to spread misinformation and chaos. It might sound familiar. Now, just as then, the dogmas of the past are no longer fit for the stormy present. And I am determined to work with all of you to steer us through. It begins for me by resetting the relationship between government and the media. It's been a dark, divisive decade where we found multiple ways across our country to divide ourselves from one another, and so many of you have found yourselves at the centre of that storm. And it is my firm belief that as a country we are weaker for it. So my promise to you is that for as long as we are in power, the era of government-stoked culture wars is over. Politicians will always have a view about who and what you feature, but it is not our job to decide. And there is a good reason for it, because being truthful, not neutral, is the job. Reflecting on some of these controversies a few years ago, Christiane Amanpour said, "I learned long ago covering the ethnic cleansing and genocide in Bosnia, never to equate victim with aggressor, never to equate a false moral or factual equivalence, because then you are accomplice to the most unspeakable crimes and consequences." She said, "I believe in being truthful, not neutral, and I believe we must stop banalising the truth." And that is not just your right, but it's your duty. It's crucial to whether this country succeeds. Because without the ability to speak truth to power, to hold up a mirror to the way government operates, we will never remedy the catastrophic collapse of trust in politics itself. Politics is the only tool that working class people in our country have ever had to create change, and after the last decade, it is in crisis. And let me be clear about this too. We believe in public service broadcasting. For too long, the Tories came to conferences like this and talked about recognising the value of public service broadcasters while undermining trust, assaulting credibility and sowing uncertainty. Our government will be different. We're wasting no time in handing you the tools that you need. These profound changes to how and where people get their news really matter. And when warring political tribes with separate news sources and information feeds construct their own realities, it costs us dear. It costs us the ability to understand one another. And we've seen how pernicious, unchecked disinformation can fan the flames of violence this summer on display in our towns and cities. My friend Peter Kyle and the team at the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology are tackling incitement and disinformation already through the Online Safety Act. And in my department, we inherited a Media Act from the previous government with important reforms to the regulation of television and radio services that will ensure that as the way we consume media changes, the landscape changes with them. That's why we established Ofcom back in 2002, and it's why we've empowered Ofcom to start implementing the Media Act today. Steph Peacock, our media minister, signed the regulations last month, and today I'm writing to Ofcom to kick off their review of the video-on-demand market. This review will lay the ground for a more level playing field for all mainstream services, with video-on-demand services regulated to the same high standards we expect from traditional broadcasters. And, as importantly, it'll maintain the prominence of public service content. Ernest Bevin once said that he wanted to be the Minister for Labour for 50 years, not literally, but because the Labour settlement he was building with the British people was one that was built to last. And in the same vein, I want the work we do together to lay the foundations for and secure the future of public service broadcasting until well into the second half of this coming century. No more government by gimmick and press release, but the hard yards of rewiring how we do things in this country. And it starts with the most fundamental question facing us, which is the future of the BBC, which fills a role in our national life that cannot be filled elsewhere. Every TV project I visited as Culture Secretary has a contribution from the BBC behind it somewhere along the line, whether it's content, training, or commissioning. But for too long, the BBC has been caught between the state and the market, with obligations that create an unlevel playing field, but increasingly reliant on commercial income. The licence fee, which we're committed to retaining at a very minimum for the rest of this charter period, is increasingly challenging. For too long, it's my view that ministers have patched this up, with the pressure to commercialise sitting uneasily alongside the BBC's ability to provide content for all audiences. And I believe that this is untenable, and that the importance of the obligations placed on the BBC, especially when it comes to the World Service, shows the vital need for sustainable public funding. The next charter review has to ensure the BBC doesn't just survive, but thrives for decades to come. And as part of that, the most important consideration is how to ensure the public feel ownership of their national broadcaster, that it belongs to and is responsive to them, that it enriches their lives wherever they live and whatever their background, a truly national broadcaster in which all of us have a stake. And if we're honest, that's not just a challenge for the BBC. It's our ambition that when we turn to face the country again in 5 years' time, we'll face a country far more at ease with itself, that can celebrate its rich diversity and where people know that their contribution is seen and valued wherever they live and whatever their background. I cannot emphasise strongly enough how important you all are to that effort, because for far too long, too many people have not seen themselves reflected in the story we tell ourselves about ourselves as a nation. But never underestimate the power of Derry Girls, All Creatures Great and Small, Queer as Folk. These are shows that can bind people in to the notion of public service broadcasting in a way that nothing else does. A few years ago, the Royal Exchange, one of my favourite theatres in the country, put on a play about the women of the miners' strike. And on one of my most deprived council estates, the women got together and hired a coach and went off to see it. This was a story that had been told so many times about their lives without them in it. And it was magical to see their reaction when they were written back into the centre of their own story. As several of the sessions today have demonstrated, there are some great examples of this from your industry. The decision by Channel 4 to relocate to Leeds has, Tracy Brabin was telling me last week, been an absolute game changer for West Yorkshire. Just as the decision of the BBC to move to Media City all those years ago has opened up opportunities and voices on the news to people outside of the M25. There's power as well in regional TV. Without Lucy Meacock, a Northwest institution, and Granada Reports, who after the groundbreaking documentary Hillsborough returned to that story again and again and again, there would never have been justice for the 97. My stepdad was a working class kid from Bury, first in his family to stay on at school beyond the age of 12 and later go on to university. He ended up becoming the head of current affairs at Granada and the editor of World in Action for over 20 years. And he knew till the day that he died that that had only been possible for him because of the opportunities that local newspapers and Granada TV provided. And for all of the efforts made by so many of you here in this room, it should shame us all that television is one of the most centralised and exclusive industries in the UK. Because who tells the story determines the story that is told. So I want to ask, if you aren't commissioning content from every part of the country, towns and villages as well as major cities, why not? If you bus people in rather than recruit locally, stop it. Talent is everywhere, opportunity is not. And if you've moved jobs and people and content, but the heads of department and commissioners are all still in an office in London, do something about it. 8% is the proportion of working class people in TV. 23% is the proportion of commissions made by companies based outside of London. And 30% is the fall in trust in media over the last decade. None of this is inevitable. And I know why, because I've met the pioneers who are trying to change it. I was privileged to meet Stephen Knight recently to hear about his work, and I'm pleased he was able to share some of that story with you earlier, because what they're doing in Birmingham, converting once great factories back into use to create the Birmingham Film Academy with the University of Birmingham, is making a huge difference. He's investing in skills to make sure there are opportunities that benefit the local community. They have a plan to recruit 20% of the workforce from the most deprived postcodes and build affordable housing so they can live in walking distance to work. And he was at pains to tell me how much he benefits from the wider broadcasting ecosystem, particularly the BBC, whose investment in skills underpins so much that others are able to do. But for him, this isn't just passion. This is good business sense, because his local workforce is an asset that attracts people to invest. Our government is considering what more we can do to help these incredible projects to succeed. And it is our determination to walk alongside you as partners to help create the conditions in which you can achieve it. But frankly, if you don't know why the film industry is so attracted to the beauty of Sunderland, or why the arts sector is buzzing in Bradford, or the potential to TV of the Welsh Valleys, it is most likely because you've never been there. And you have no right to call yourself a public service broadcaster, because public service means serving the whole people, recognising their contribution and reflecting them in our national story. Now, I know this isn't easy. The costs are short-term, the payoff is long-term. And in Westminster, there are still, incredibly, people who grumble about the move to Media City, even after all these years and so much success. But there's so much at stake, and it's my belief that an industry that belongs to the nation is an industry that will not just survive, but thrive, where the possibilities of us solving the sustainability issues that so many have brought to me over the last few months is enriched by the fact that the nation is behind their own industry. That's what I want to see. And we'll do everything we can to put rocket boosters under your efforts, but that effort in the first place belongs to you all. And just think what we'll create through us doing our bit, with everything we've got, and you doing yours, with a new relationship based on respect for one another, a television industry that leads the world and is the pride of all of Britain, thriving well into the latter half of this century. That is what I am determined that we will build together. Thank you very much.
So, Lisa, thank you again so much for joining us today. I'm going to ask a couple of questions, but then I will be looking for some questions from the audience, which we'll come to.
Oh, there is an audience.
There is. You can just see them there, thinking hard about some good questions for you. So, you've taken on one of the most exciting briefs in the Cabinet. What's the best advice that you've had coming into the job?
Well, I've had a lot of advice, as you would imagine, most of it unsolicited. I think probably, it's not really advice, it's more of an instruction, but when he appointed me to the job, the Prime Minister said that we are a government of service and that his emphasis was going to be on delivery. People are losing hope and they need to see that this government is straining every sinew to turn things around. And he then said to me, and you have one very important job to deliver. I said to him, what's that? And he said, the Euros. The right result in the Euros. So I went off to the semi-final and we won. Yay. And I WhatsApped him and said, just so you know, I've done my bit. The final is now up to you.
Oh, there you go.
And unfortunately, he did fail to deliver, but I'm sure he'll reflect on that.
I'm sure he will. And you come from a family tradition of working in factual TV production and current affairs, which we heard about. Do you think that family connection has shaped your perception of the industry?
I think very much, although the industry has changed hugely since my mum and stepdad were at Granada TV. My dad was also on the Annan Commission that set up Channel 4 all those years ago, and I think that has certainly shaped my belief in the power of television, because, you know, people in this room are storytellers and they tell the story of our country. And that's why I feel so passionately that everybody in our country, regardless of background or geography, has to see themselves and their lives and communities reflected in it. I think the contribution this industry has to make is enormously outsized. I think the other way in which my family history has shaped my perceptions around television is I'm very, very aware that when, you know, my stepdad was making really groundbreaking documentaries like Who Bombed Birmingham, which was instrumental in exposing the miscarriage of justice around the Birmingham Six, they were making World in Actions where they had teams of 50 people working on that for 12 months. You know, it's completely different now and the pressures are completely different. At the same time, I'll never forget the day that Hillsborough happened, and we'd just been out in Manchester to get our hair cut, and people were hanging out of the windows of that old Key Street office, shouting to my mum to come up, and it was unfolding right in front of us. And you know, I remember her having to make very, very difficult decisions, like whether to keep filming or to, you know, release the crew to go and help. And actually, the decision to keep filming in the end proved to be really important to getting justice. But and exposing what had really happened. But me and my sister spent the entire night in that newsroom, sort of sleeping under a desk. I remember, from my recollection, she was the only woman in the newsroom and the only person who had to think about childcare. I don't think enough of that has changed, and I'm really keen to see it change.
Yeah, clearly those experiences, you know, have showed you the importance of that investigative journalism, which does take time and money. So we know you are a fan of Hackerty Dog, and you even, I think, had a discussion with him on social media and said the BBC should relocate to Wigan, which also happens to be your constituency. But one of the big themes in your speech and in other speeches you've given is the need for greater investment in the regions and to hear all those regional voices. So my question is how you think we should go about doing that. Should we be looking for government to mandate things through quotas, through incentives? Are you looking for it to be more organic? How do you see that happening?
Look, what our government wants is a genuine partnership with this industry, you know, recognising the uniqueness of each of our roles. There are certain things that only government can do to create the conditions in which it's not just easy for you, but, you know, a brilliant opportunity for you to be able to reach the whole country and to draw on the contribution that people in every part of the country have to make. Equally, you know, if you don't want to do it, I'm sure you'll find ways not to do it. And, you know, frankly, one of the things that concerns me is not whether TV companies have been good enough at commissioning content outside of London or moving people. It's that the power has largely resided in one small part of the country in a few hands of people who tend to look like each other, think like each other. I think there are amazing opportunities out there that are being missed because most of the commissioning power and the heads of departments are based in the capital city and genuinely won't know the extent of what is on offer in every part of the country. And that in turn erodes trust and it creates issues. There's a reason, for example, why my constituents loads of them watch Hollyoaks, because Channel 4 they make it locally. You know, the script writers, some of them live in Wigan, they live all over the northwest. These are the people that decide what is told, the stories that are told and how they're told, and people recognise their own, I mean, I know it's a bit dramatic, but they recognise their own communities and lives on screen. And similarly, you know, with Question Time, I you know, whenever I go on the political shows, nobody in Wigan notices. But when I go on Question Time, they do. And I think there's a reason that people watch Question Time, because it's out in the country. It gives a voice to audiences, and people feel that the conversation is far more relevant to them and to their own lives. So for me, this is not a question of mandating. It's a question of saying, what can we do together to make this happen? Because I genuinely believe that the future of this industry and the future of our country depends on us achieving it.
Yeah. Great. So I'm going to ask one more question, then I'm going to come to the audience. So let's talk about growth. So Labour's come to power with a national mission for economic growth, and our creative industries account for about 6% of the economy, and it's been growing really, really fast. But as we've said, it's a challenging macroeconomic environment. So where do you see the potential for this next phase of growth?
Well, first of all, the growth in the creative industries is incredibly exciting. Not only is it one of the fastest growing areas of the economy, but it almost uniquely offers the possibility for really good, well-paid jobs outside of London in the southeast, particularly in parts of the country where we want to see people's right to contribute realised and hasn't been realised for far too long. There are some amazing projects happening all over the country, and as a consequence, people are seeing their own landscapes, their communities, their contribution reflected on screen, and we want to do more of that. There are several ways that we can contribute, and we already are starting that process. One is to reiterate to the audience the importance that we place on the tax credit system. It was Gordon Brown who first introduced the film tax credit, and in fact I ran into him in the department just yesterday morning, and we had a chat about that and what more we can do to support particularly, indies and others to help them to thrive. Secondly, the apprenticeship levy. I know that skills is a real issue, and I've already started work with the Education Secretary on making sure that that is fit for purpose for our industries. Thirdly, we are keen to make sure that we deal with skills in the round, and we have kicked off a curriculum review that puts creative education back at the centre of the curriculum. It's our view that that is the key to unlocking things for so many young people, and that ability to live richer, larger lives is the right of every child. But for this industry in particular, it's also an economic issue because it ensures that young people are growing up acquiring the right skills from a very early age, which then creates that pipeline through. So lots of things to do, but we've got lots of ideas, and we're really looking forward to working with you all to make that a success.
Brilliant, and you've touched on quite a few things that have come up today despite our creative edge that give us that competitive advantage in a very competitive global market. So I'm now going to ask for a couple of questions from the floor. John McVeigh, I see you there with your hand up. Please ask your question, introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Anna. Hello, Secretary of State. Welcome. I think you're touching all the right points, particularly on out of London. I think that's a big issue. I hope Ofcom is listening to that as they consider the Channel 4 relicensing and the debate that's been going on about that. I'm sure you've had the letters. If you're going to develop more work, more opportunities out of London, nearly all the jobs in our industry, apart from core staff and small businesses, and I knew your stepdad, and he had a small production company, but he hired freelancers, and I'm sure you know that most of the creative industries rely on freelancers, particularly in film and TV production. Some of the narrative that's been around the debate in the labour movement is somehow freelancing also equates to 0-hour contracts and bad employment, when actually freelancing is a fantastic career opportunity. It can be highly paid. You can go on to win an Oscar. I think as our Culture Secretary, it'd be really good with your Cabinet colleagues if you can just make clear that freelancing, and also to those kids who might want to come into our industry, that freelancing is actually a really good vocational opportunity.
Yeah, so we shall I?
Yeah, briefly.
So we're really alive to this issue, and we've got to get the balance right between ensuring that young people, particularly young people, it's not always young people, are paid properly and treated properly at work, and that they have opportunities to get into industries like TV, which, to be honest, at the moment are fairly scarce if you come from particular backgrounds. If you have to move down to London, if you have to do unpaid internships, frankly, you've written off 95% of the country before you even start, and that cannot be acceptable or sustainable. But I do recognise exactly what you say about the way that the creative industries work, and we've already kick-started that work alongside my friend Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, who's leading on it for us, and Johnny Reynolds, who is the new Business Secretary. Johnny has put creative industries absolutely at the centre of our industrial strategy, and is also leading that work on the New Deal for working people. So it's something that is very much at the forefront of our minds, and we will work with you to make sure that we get that right. The last thing that we want to do is choke off the ability for this industry to be creative and to thrive. But we are absolutely committed as a government to making sure that people are treated fairly, paid fairly, and that we can make sure that we open up opportunities to the widest range of people from the widest range of backgrounds.
Thank you. Do you know, we are just about to run out of time, and I know you've got to get back to see your little boy. So final quick question from me, which is, you've been on the campaign trail, you might have had a bit of time to watch a bit of content. What thing have you watched recently that really exemplifies the UK's creative edge?
Oh God, it's the thing that I watched most recently last night is, I can't, all the officials are looking at me like, don't say it. But Netflix are here, so what the hell, Emily in Paris. I am a huge fan.
Woo, good choice. Well, listen, thank you very much indeed, Lisa, for joining us today. And we've really appreciated it. And
Thanks so
it was
much.
really good to hear what you had to say. Thank you.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you so much.